And what's your wife's name?
Marion.
Marion? Marion, okay. So, what we need to do, when I think Marion, I think that the girlfriend of Indiana Jones, okay, from the movie. So, I want to picture, when I think of you, I want to picture the Sears Tower, the events of 9/11, and then after that, I want to picture the Indiana Jones movie, the woman from Indiana Jones. I want to picture those three and associate them. And if I put any amount of repetition in that, you can see that if you can learn 15 items just like you learned, if you put any amount of repetition into this whatsoever, it's going to become habit after a short amount of time. And you're going to have three things that you know about that person. Next time you see this person over the summer, let's say you only see them every few months or whatever, they're a client, whoever. And next time you see them in July or whatever, you say, hey, I don't see you before September. Happy birthday. You know? You don't necessarily have to remember, you take this to the highest level and remember the date and everything. But just knowing that they were born in September, I think, is really hugely touching to people. They're really impressed. You remember that kind of thing. Let alone their spouse's name or where they're from, all those little details. So if you just grab three things, and keep in mind, again, you just did 15 right off the bat with no effort whatsoever. If you just make a little bit of a cheat sheet and review on these every once in a while and have a little bit of data on people, you can do huge things with this. Now here's a great thing. Even though it doesn't relate to memory, it relates to this association that we just went over. Here's a very powerful thing I just came up with very recently. What I did was I made a list of a number of things that I'm thankful for. In fact, my list is 20, but I have about 10 of them listed here. And some of them can be very simple things. They don't have to be anything huge. For instance, I listed my parents, obviously, there. I'm happy for all these things. I put the fourth one down there is that I can easily travel anywhere in the world. I mean, when you stop to think about it, how incredible is it that we can get on a plane and fly anywhere in the world? How many people, really percentage-wise, can do that? You think everybody can, but really worldwide, very few people can. And when you take it to a broader spectrum of how many people historically that have ever lived on the face of this planet have been able to do that, we're in a very narrow field of people on this planet that can afford to do things like that. So we're very, very fortunate. But I listed out 10 or 20 things I'm thankful for. And then I listed out 10 or 20 things that I see on a regular basis. A taxi cab, a city bus, a guy walking a dog, a jet contrail going through the sky, all these different things. And I associate each one of these with something in the something on my list there. So that every day when I see those things, I'm constantly, subconsciously, and consciously reminded of those things. For instance, when I see a jet contrail through the sky, I see the tip of that jet contrail wrapped around my parents. And I just say, man, am I lucky to have the parents I have. They were incredible people. And I was very fortunate. And I'm constantly reminded of that. And you can even take it into acts. For instance, one thing I like to do is I like to associate something really positive from my list here with somebody cutting me off in traffic. Anything stressful, the boss getting upset with you, all these different things, you can associate those things with something positive and immediately turn it into something positive that will affect your life in completely the opposite way. I've even got a great thing too, if somebody cuts me off and uses sign language, I just say, hey, I'm really glad that I don't live in that guy's world, because obviously if he's that angry of a person, I'm just really thankful that I'm not that guy, and that's my to be thankful for. So make a list of 10 or 20 things, or however many you want, and associate them very strongly, and remind yourself daily about these 10 or 20 different things. It's amazing what an impact it has on the rest of your day, because you're constantly carrying that around with you from day to day. So here's a list. Each item, great parents to the contrail, etc. So I used a park bench, dog being walked, every time I see a movie theater, etc. They don't have to have any association to any of those things in any way, shape, or form. They can just be all these different things. So, all right. Now, there are some pitfalls to some of this as well, okay? And I want to warn you one of the pitfalls, not because I want it's a negative thing, but you have to be careful using picture images. And the funny thing is, probably the worst case of this happened long before I ever started doing this. I started using picture images when I was a kid. I've always used them from time to time, but I just started doing this presentation fairly recently. Now, about 15 or so years ago, before I lived in Colorado, my family, my parents and my sister and I all went on a family vacation. And we drove to Colorado to see my cousin, who lives out in Hayden, Colorado. Now, Hayden is very close to the city of Craig, and we were looking at highway signs. Now, as you drive down the highway, you'll notice, let's say you're, I don't know, in the middle of Nebraska or something like that, or I don't know, just say, actually, a better example would be to say you're crossing the Colorado state line. You might see a sign like this, right? Denver, Colorado Springs, the two bigger cities. But as you get closer to Denver, you might start seeing signs like Denver, Thornton, or Denver, Broomfield, things like that, right? So they kind of narrow the field. So as we were driving on our trip, I was following a lot of signs that looked a lot like this. Steamboat, Craig, etc. like that. Craig is out near Steamboat, for those of you who don't know. And we're driving along, and I'm constantly following this sign for Craig. Now, as we got closer, the signs narrowed down a little bit, and the signs started looking like this, Craig and Hayden. But I had already conditioned myself to look for Craig. I was constantly reminded, I had that visual image of going to Craig, Craig, Craig. But as we got closer, I started having to narrow the field down a little bit to go now to Hayden instead of Craig. And so I kept confusing the two as I was seeing the highway signs. So I finally said, I'm going to use my little memory aid here. I'm going to use my memory trick, and I'm going to make a picture image of Hayden. So what does Hayden look like to me? I thought of Hayden from the TV show Coach. Anybody remember that show?
Yeah.
TV show Coach. So I'm going to picture Hayden Fox, who was the main character there in the TV show Coach. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to forget it now. We're going to Hayden. We're not going to Craig. Every time I see a sign, I'll drive towards Hayden. And I kept driving towards Craig. I couldn't figure out why I kept driving towards Craig. And finally I realized that Craig T. Nelson played Hayden Fox. So you do have to be careful to some degree.